Good morning, logic class, or good afternoon, or good evening, or whatever time of day you are happening to watch this video. Hopefully not 2 o'clock in the morning, but whatever time you're watching it, howdy Podna. How's it going? Anyway, today's lesson we're technically not going to do a lesson, we are just going to review for the test on Monday. So you should be checking this out sometime around Thursday or Friday. You can watch this as many times as you want, to review as many times as you want, to get the hang of what we're trying to understand for the test. So again, your test is pretty much over your notes with a little bit of variation. So it's not that you can just memorize your notes necessarily. There's a few things you have to know. But it all has to do with basically with your notes and what we've learned. The test is over lessons 33 through lesson 50. So it's a cumulative test since we started studying formal logic. So in other words, since we started the new textbook, Introduction to Deduction or whatever it's called, that's where we're starting now. We won't necessarily have questions on every single lesson, but basically that's the range. So I'm going to go over pretty much what you need to know. So if you follow along closely, make marks in your notes. So take out your notes, open to lesson 33, and follow along with me and make marks or whatever. Highlight whatever you want to do, the things that you need to know that I go over. If you do that, and understand what I go over with you today, you should have a pretty good grasp on what the test is going to cover. So you should be prepared. All right? Got it? Makes sense? Sweet. Okay. According to Socrates, what kind of life is not worth living? According to Socrates, what kind of life is not worth living? The unexamined life. Aristotle believed in something called a priori truths. What does a priori mean? It means self-evident. Very good. Awesome. Never be afraid to sit a while and do what? According to Lorraine Hansberry. Never be afraid to sit a while and think. Okay, what is it called when after making one or more judgment propositions we conclude that yet another proposition necessarily follows from the first ones? That is called inference. Very good. The arrangement of terms and words in a proposition so that the proposition either affirms or negates something is called what? Categorical form. Name one kind of sentence that does not have a truth value. Okay, so in logic we deal with propositions, which are sentences that have truth values, right? We compare them and we figure out, what's true and what's false. But there's 5 different types of sentences that don't necessarily have a truth value. Can you give me one? Questions is one. Commands is one. Exclamations, greetings, or just plain nonsense. So, a sentence is a proposition when it has a what? A truth value. Yes. Now, just because a sentence has a truth value doesn't mean it's true. A truth value means it can be either true or false. It can be one or the other. A question is not true or false. A question is just a question, right? A command is not true or false. It's a command. Nonsense isn't true or false. It just doesn't make sense. Okay? But any proposition that can either be true or false is said to have a truth value. Arguments typically have 2 premises and 1 what? Conclusion. Every proposition has what? One subject and one predicate. Don't say one subject and one verb, okay? It needs to be predicate. One subject and one predicate. The blank of a proposition deals with the proposition stating whether or not something is or isn't. It's either affirmative or negative. That's the quality of the proposition. Quality of the proposition deals with whether or not something is or isn't. So that's either affirmative or negative. Sorry, my nose is itchy. Mrs. Weaver must be thinking about me. Anyway. The blank of a proposition deals with whether or not the proposition is referring to all or part of something. It's either universal or particular. That's the quantity, okay? That deals with whether or not the proposition is referring to all or part of something, and it's either universal or particular. Okay, awesome. So universal affirmative statements are what kind of statements? A, E, I, or O. Universal affirmative statements are A statements. Particular affirmative statements are I statements. Universal negative statements are E statements. Particular negative statements are O statements. Awesome job. The pronoun I is always what? Is it always universal or is it always particular? It's always universal. Always universal. What is important when determining whether or not something is universal or particular? Context. You need to understand the context to know whether or not something is universal or particular. Now sometimes you can tell without, you just know, but if you're not sure, often context is key to figuring that out. Okay, so I have a couple of ones here where I want you to change the sentence into categorical form. So I'm going to give you an example and walk you through it, just to give you some practice on this, okay? So I'll give you a sentence, you change it into cat form, all right? So let's use this sentence. No one likes having to stay away from other people during a pandemic. No one likes having to stay away from other people during a pandemic. So let's change that into cat form. Now remember how to do that. First of all, you find the subject. What's the subject? Now, you're going to be tempted to say no one, but let's say people, okay? Let's use the noun people. How many people? No people, all right? So let's make that our subject. No people. Okay, what is the predicate? Let's rename the second part of that sentence changing it into a predicate nominative, essentially. So if I say no one likes having to stay away from other people during a pandemic, let's change it into a predicate nominative. The predicate, we could say, is people who enjoy social distancing, okay? Let's just change that a bit and make it say the same thing. People who enjoy social distancing. Is this universal or is it particular? It's universal. It's talking about everyone. Everybody in the world, okay? It's saying no one, but in saying no, it's talking about everyone. So this is universal. Is it affirmative or negative? It is negative, again, because it's saying no one, right? So what would be our categorical form? Remember our subject? No people. So let's start with that. No people, and again we need to have a being verb, so let's use the being verb are. No people are people who enjoy social distancing. No people are people who enjoy social distancing. Okay? That's what we're going to change it to. So the initial sentence was, no one likes having to stay away from other people during a pandemic. And we're changing it to, no people are people who enjoy social distancing. And that's a universal negative. Okay. One thing I want you guys to know, to be able to do, I'm going to have it on the test, is I need you to be able to draw the square of opposition, okay? So I need you to draw this whole thing. You need to be able to label all the relationships. I need the arrows. And with the arrows, make sure you put the arrows on the end. I'm just noticing now that I did not put arrows on the ends of these lines. Bad Mr. Weaver. I should have done that. It's important, okay? It's important. And the reason it's important is because it shows the direction of the relationship. So for contradiction, subcontrariety, and contrariety, the relationship goes both ways, right? But for subimplication and superimplication, the relationship only goes one way. So it's very important to make sure you not only put the lines, but that you put the arrows on the ends of the lines. I want all this. I want the names, I want the arrows, I want the letters, okay? I want the relationships written down. So it's in your book. You've had to do it a couple of times as part of your homework, never by memory, but I want you to be able to draw the square of opposition, okay? Because once you have that in your head, it will help you a lot. Okay, so once you know this, it's going to help you a lot with some of the other questions on the test, all right? So if you get this right, it's going to help you with the rest, or at least part of the rest of the test. So let's see, what is the relationship between I and O statements? What's the relationship between I and O statements? Right here, we got it. Subcontrariety, right? Subcontrariety. What is the relationship between AO statements and EI statements? Okay? So we have two groups. The relationship between AO statements and EI statements. What is that? Once again, the square of opposition shows us. The relationship between AO statements and EI statements is contradiction. Okay? Let's see. What is the relationship between A to I statements and E to O statements? So the one-way relationship between A to I statements and E to O statements would be what? Subimplication. Okay? The one-way relationship between E to O statements, A to I statements. What is the one-way relationship between I and A statements and O and E statements? So the other way. OE, IA. The one-way relationship is superimplication. The relationship between A and E statements. So A and E statements is contrariety. Fantastic job. You're getting this. What is a methodical way that you discover what you believe about a certain scenario, value, or proposition? Our last lesson. Inference analysis. Okay? What kind of beliefs are never healthy to hold on to? What kind of beliefs are never healthy to hold on to? False, contradictory, or absurd beliefs are never healthy to hold on to. What is a normal part of becoming a mature, thoughtful, happy, and responsible person? Examination of beliefs and values. Okay? Examination of beliefs and values. Okay. So, tell me something about the relationship between the propositions. So, A and E propositions. What do we know? You might have to back up a little in your notes because I kind of jumped ahead. But you might have to back up a little bit. Look, where we talked about the relationship of contrariety. What is significant about this relationship? Well, they can both be false at the same time, okay? They can both be false, but they cannot be what? They cannot both be true at the same time. So if one is true, that means the other is going to be false. But if one is false, the other one can be either true or false, because they can both be false at the same time. How about subcontrary? Once again, that is the opposite. Subcontrary statements can both be true at the same time, okay? But they cannot both be false at the same time. So both I and O statements can be true at the same time, subcontrary, but they can't both be false at the same time. So if one is true, the other one could be true. If one is false, it means the other one has to be true. Okay? What's the relationship for contradiction? Okay, once again, contradiction is the easiest one. If one contrary proposition is true, the other one has to be false. It's just the way it always is. This is true, this is false. This is true, this is false. If this is true, this is false. If this is true, this is false. Okay? Contradiction, one is true, the other is false, across the board. That's the way it is. How about the relationship of sub-implication? Sub-implication. The relationship of sub-implication, the universal implies the truth of the particular. So if the universal is true, that means the particular is also true. That's the one-way relationship of sub-implication. Super-implication is the opposite. The truth of the particular does not necessitate the truth of the universal. The falsity of the particular does necessitate the falsity of the universal. Okay, guys? Make sure you know those relationships. Okay? Know those different things about the relationships. If this is true, then this has to be true or not, or whatever. So make sure you study that part of your notes where we talk about the 5 different relationships. Contrariety, subcontrariety, contradiction, sub-implication, super-implication. Make sure you know that. Okay, guys, we got it? All right? Again, watch this video as many times as you need to. That's all I got.